fella making sheep's milk yogurt in northern England. And it was just creamy and delicious. And I thought, oh my goodness, if I could milk sheep, that would be great for a small family farm. And when I came back and told my friends I'm going to milk sheep, and there've been dairy goats in this country for 100 years, Mary. But when I came to UGA, I took the classes, but I was busy looking for more. I mean, that's what sold me on the goats, was they turn privet, poison ivy, kudzu, all the little brushy stuff into tasty milk. I love the animals, and if nobody had showed me these animals, I wouldn't have known.
And you have dairy goats.
Correct.
What kind of goats?
Saanen, it's Saanen. They are a Swiss breed, so on the Alps, and that the white coat color is dominant. There's Alpines and Oberhaslis and Toggenburgs that come from that region. Alpines can be, I'll call it party color.
Okay.
They're not, and the Toggenburgs is what Carl Sandburg's wife raised, and they're a smoky gray with white stockings and then some white face marking.
Why did you choose that breed?
I was looking for something where the person who owned them was conscientious about tuberculosis and brucellosis testing. There's a thing called caprine arthritic encephalitis. And if the goats have that, they'll pass it from mother to daughter. And that way, they come down at 2 and 3 and 4 years old crawling on their knees because they've got an arthritis. And I wanted to make sure before I bought an animal that the person that I purchased from had that kind of animal. And I went to the goat meetings that they have. There's a group of folks that meet once every other month, because listening to all the different ones, when I met the woman that I purchased from, Linda Pearson of Rock Point Farm, she was truly a farmer, animal-oriented person.
What do you mean by that?
There were other folks who had come from either showing horses or showing dogs, but because I wanted somebody who had a farm background, and I'd go to the different farms and they didn't have their farm laid out, now Temple Grandin with all of her design things, but I thought about the animals back when I put this together.
Yeah.
And knew that if you worked with the animals, I mean, I can have my herd checked by the veterinarian once a year in an hour, and that's 60 animals in an hour, where there's other people that are still rounding them up for the veterinarian, and the veterinarian doesn't want to come and see those folks.
You chose the Saanen breed because the person that you found had reliable, accountable, and gene-specific animals just happened to have that breed, or?
Well, the animals themselves, when I went to visit, they were calm, they were peaceful, they were easy to work with, and that's what I've found as I'm here. I mean, I went to visit my friend, and her female animals, as I came through the gate, would stand up and act like they were going to headbutt me. And I thought, no, I'm having small children with my goats. I don't need anybody who's got an attitude like that. These, the first 11-year-old that Linda let me borrow, because she was in milk in December and she didn't want to milk in December, and I just wanted the milk. And that goat had never seen a small child. She came up behind my daughter and just pushed her a little bit. And my daughter turned around and held her face and said, I really am going to like you, so you should be nice. And that was the end of it. That was the end of it. At 3 years old, my daughter said that. And so,
That's sweet.
If that's the kind of animal, that's what you want.
Why did you get dairy goats, and how long have you been here? Because this is an interesting part. We're like in Atlanta. And I mean, we're not in the city, but we're pretty close.
We're 13 miles from the capital, but this is Clayton County. It's not Fulton or DeKalb. And the woman who moved here in 1931 had 49 acres. She did the subdivision out front and on the side to make her money in her later years. But this was her home place from 1931 to 1981.
Did you buy it from her?
No, there was a woman who has horses, and she built the barn that we have. And that was, I think, her indoor arena and keeping her horses. The little block building is a building that I had built to the dairy specification.
When did you move here?
October of 95, but my degree is in animal science. I had worked with horses growing up, but when I came to UGA, I took the classes, but I was busy looking for more.
What do you mean more?
They introduced you to pigs and beef cattle and dairy cattle and a few sheep. That was it. Now, 4-H, they have a sheep raising program for children, but as soon as you've raised that sheep, you have to kill it. And as a young person, I knew that I couldn't pour all my heart into that sheep and then have it go.
Yeah.
And so I didn't join that program. But as I graduated with my degree, first I worked as a research technician with pigs and kept all the research protocols and taught the graduate students the things that I was supposed to teach them. Then moved on to a grazing facility for sheep and cow. I went for a change, and they had sheep that I worked with out there. And as I was doing the research with the sheep, the person who was their shepherd was transitioning to another job. So I transitioned to the shepherd, and it was an incredible opportunity that they allowed me. And there were mistakes made, I won't say there weren't, but they trusted me well enough. And so I worked there 2 years into it. It was 6,800 acres of government land.
Wow.
I got a little lonely. So I came back east. My sister was in England. And so my mother told me that, I wasn't doing anything important, that I should go because she was lonely. So I took my leave of the government work and went for 2 months. By the time we got over there, by the time I got a passport and the travel arrangements all taken care of, we got over there, my mother and I, and she'd found the love of her life and was not interested in leaving him.
Your sister?
Yeah. So my mother and I visited her, visited friends in Norway, and then I traveled around Europe for just a bit, not here and there, now and then. But as I came back to England, there was a fella making sheep's milk yogurt in northern, western England. And it was just creamy and delicious. And I thought, oh my goodness, if I could milk sheep, that would be great. For a small family farm, that would be great. And when I came back and told my friends, I'm going to milk sheep. And there've been dairy goats in this country for 100 years, Mary. And I started looking into it and found these. And after working with sheep, that every day you work with them, and they're still scared to death of you. So working with these, they give back so much. They're so personable that it was a good thing. And I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. I'd started working on the fish docks of New Jersey when I was 13. So hard work any way you slice it. This has been wonderful fun. My children and I had a great time with it. We'd go to the fairs in the fall. And
I've seen many of your plaques that were hanging up there on my way in.
Well, that's Mandy and her children would go. And so my children would go. And while, we have relatives up in the Northeast, my children's close relatives are Mandy's children and the other, because they go camping at the fair with their other goat friends.
Uh-huh.
Right.
So you said you just wanted this to be a family farm. How did it transition from a family farm to this big of an operation?
It was 12.5 acres when we moved in, and over time I've been able to acquire land across the driveway and up a little ways and then across the creek, so that we're now 40 acres.
Now, can we pause on that for a second? Because like we said before, you're surrounded by subdivision. So how have you been able to get the land? That seems rather difficult in an area that's already being subdivided.
Across the road, because the reason that this hadn't been built up to that point is we're the drain for the whole neighborhood.
Oh, I mean, it is quite hilly.
When you look at the roll of the land,
yeah,
all of those houses, they drain back this way. Those houses there drain back this way.
Yeah.
They even have a pipe that takes water, storm water from the road next, behind us, and then puts it over here.
Wow.
So it all just goes through here, drains to the creek, and eventually makes its way to the Atlantic.
Wow. Okay. So nobody wanted it because it was the drain plot.
Pretty much, yeah.
But for
Yeah,
a
and
farmer, that's a
rocky.
great idea.
Yeah, and for, I mean, that's what sold me on the goats was they turn privet, poison ivy, kudzu, all the little brushy stuff into tasty milk.
Yeah.
So when we go to the woods, you'll see they've cleared it out. And all that privet doesn't need to be here. But I was interested in a product every day. You know, if you've got vegetables, and 30 years ago, there wasn't a hoop house. There wasn't remake covering for your vegetables. Looking at having a product every day. And when I went to Washington State to visit a friend, she said, you can learn anything by books in the library. And I went and got a book at the library about making cheese and started from there. And one thing led to another. And I made the mistakes along the way, but it was the learning that gave me the basis for what I'm doing today. Because there were so many people with allergies and sensitivities coming down the driveway, I told my husband that I thought maybe that I could make a business out of it.
When was that?
It's been 16 years ago. I guess 2007 is when we built the building, and then 2008, I guess, I got my first certification. Back at that time, the Department of Agriculture of the state of Georgia was not interested in small dairy, and I had to fight tooth and nail in order to get the building built, and they'd come and inspect and say, nope, we don't like this, and they'd go away for 3 weeks. They're much better about that now. They've seen that small dairy does have a place.
Yeah.
But back at that point, the person who was in charge of the Department of Agriculture saw no reason to have small dairy.
Georgia always been a hard place to have raw milk. Because we drank raw milk for years, and when we came on the road, now we have a hard time finding it. And I've heard that Georgia, like, you can't find raw milk in Georgia, basically.
Well,
Has it always been difficult?
Even with that, I am a cheese maker. You know, if people want raw milk, they can milk their own animals and do what they want because it's a free country. But as far as the legalities of what I do, I make cheese.
When did you decide that cheese was your product? Because you said that you wanted a product every day. When did you decide that it was cheese, not milk?
Because if you're selling milk, there's a $40,000 bottling capping machine that you have to have before you ever sell the first gallon.
Oh.
This is very minimal as far as input, but when I say that, it's $200,000, $300,000 that you see in that building, but that I did over time, eating carefully beans and rice and doing as much as I could here at home rather than processed foods because I wanted to do this. When I started with this, the people that were milking goats told me, oh, you have your babies in March and you milk until November and then you dry them off. And I thought, but what about from November until March? Well, the people who were talking to me said, oh, well, we aren't really interested in the milk. We go to goat shows. But I wanted that product to be healthful for my family. I worked at making the creamy goat cheese first because that was the easiest. And then making the feta goat cheese because feta was really what I loved. And then several years into it, I found a recipe for an Italian basket cheese that's similar to a mozzarella, and it's called Tuma, which is T-U-M-A. Now, with that, it's not an exact mozzarella. You don't pull and stretch it with hot water and your hands in hot water. But for the child who was allergic to cow's milk, they could have a pizza party just like their friends with that particular cheese. And so, you know, when you hear them run down the market, Mom, 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 I can have a pizza party, that just made me really happy.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, for those folks, that's who I do it for.
Yeah.
There's no mold inhibitor in the cheese so that it only lasts for about 3 weeks in the refrigerator. But, you know, that's what I'm dedicated to.
Absolutely. So with your goats, how many do you have out here right now?
There's 50 adult milkers, and then I have 20 juniors, if you want to call them juniors. So they were born last February, March, April. so they weren't quite ready to breed yet.
Okay.
They'll have babies a little bit later in the season. This is the start of my season. I could have had babies in January and February, but this year I didn't want to be dragging them in and out of the cold, so I think we have 30 in milk at the moment, but because of the way I do this, it's not like the rest of the world does it. Once I breed these animals, as they start slowing down in milk production, they still come into the parlor, but then I'll put, depending on how full or not full they are, I'll put a grease pencil mark on one leg, and with that, we know that we only milk that animal in the morning, not in the evening. Their bodies will gradually stop the milk production and grow the babies.
So you slowly wean them.
Slowly, you know, watching their system, because I've had some that they only had a single baby in there, so they were still milking and doing a good job. But if I had stopped milking that animal, that baby would have gotten so big that it would have been very difficult to have that baby born.
That's a good point.
So that's why I work with their bodies.
Yeah.
Open this gate here.
Okay, so this gate comes open when they're ready to be milked.
And this gate, so that...
And this panel is a gate? Oh, gotcha. Okay.
So morning and evening, we set this up.
Yep.
I'm going to close this. And then, do you, with your camera, want to walk up that way? And I'll meet you on the inside.
Sure! So I'm going to pretend to be a goat here.
Okay.
So the goats come in this way. Oh, maybe. Into your parlor. Oh, and then they stick their heads through the bucket.
Right. There's 10 spaces, and it cascades. So the first one puts her head in.
Yep.
And it clips. And then the second one puts their head in.
Gotcha.
So everybody comes in and files in.
Gotcha.
Okay, and now I'm going to unhook these. Yep, that's right. And then during the day, I have the food covered over.
Oh.
But that way, especially in the earlier years when my children were helping, there's always a gate left open. There's always a sneaky pants goat that's going to find her way. So if you put a bucket over top of everything, then
that's a good idea.
They can't get in here. If they do, it's more aggravating for them to find it. And in the summertime, there are flies. Yeah. And I don't want flies all in the food.
Yeah, so, especially in the parlor, absolutely.
Right, we cover all of this up. And so when they are finished, close that up. So we let them in. We wash everyone with a chlorine-based solution. We wipe everyone and check the milk. And then when they're finished, we open that panel,
and they go back
this
out.
door, and then I just pull one lever, and everyone is let loose at the same time.
Okay.
If I want to do it individually, I can.
Yeah.
But usually everybody finishes at about the same time.
And you designed this yourself?
Yes.
Wow.
Well, there were so many different folks out there. And when you ask the Department of Agriculture for some help with this, they're like, you just draw it up and then we'll tell you yes or no.
Thanks.
That's not really helpful.
Right.
But I looked at some other dairy cow places. I'd seen one or two goat dairies. But I thought, for myself, if I did this with 40, we drifted to 50 animals this summer because I had 10 brand new milkers. They are not going to milk up to, at 1 year old, they're not going to milk up to a gallon a day starting off.
Right.
And so we brought those in, saw which ones would milk, the structure of the udder and how the goats were doing. And so we did milk 50 this year. The target is 40, but I can't trim feet on 60, 70 animals. And 40 acres in a dry year or a year where we've been flooded out, I want to make sure that there's enough for them to eat out in the different pastures. Yeah. And so I keep the numbers to the amount that we've got. You know, and it comes and goes. Yeah. And so that's why we keep it the way we do.
So you can do 10 at a time, and at 40 to 50 animals,
right.
You
and
can milk 4 or 5
It takes about an
batches.
hour to get this done.
That's not bad at all.
No, but you see, built
short.
for me. And we went and got this from a place in Vermont that I'd seen in a sheep magazine. But it works really well. And then the hoses that you see down there, we have 5 assemblies, and then we do every other goat. Because I am here with the milking, I know who's going to be slower or faster. I can put a mark on the tail of the animals that are a little bit slower, and that tells everyone who's helping me as well. This one's going to be slower, put her on first.
Right.
And so those kinds of things are just those little differences.
Yeah. You kind of pieced together different designs and made this. I'm curious, there's not like a butt bar or anything here.
You don't need it.
Do they like fall off?
No.
They're very aware of where they are.
Oh, yes. And
that's interesting.
And because we do the same thing every single day. And the first time we brought animals in here, we brought them in 2 at a time, put a head in. Okay, nobody's by themselves. They got to do this. And after they came in 2, maybe 3 times, they're ready.
They figured it out.
They're like, okay, we get fed in here. We like this. It's fine.
Yeah.
And so as we're conditioning, if we know that there's new animals coming up, then we'll bring them in and just massage the udders and work with them.
And let them know that when they're in here, they're going to be touched. Their udders will be handled, but they get food.
Right. And so we work with them little by little to condition that this is what we do. But they've always had people leading them places, to take them out to pasture. The small ones get led around, and so it's not a crazy thing. They're people oriented.
Yeah.
And so that's the way we do.
So the milk goes
through the hose down to the silver container and then back to that silver container, which is called the receiver because it receives the milk.
Yep.
And then there's a float in there that once this lifts up when it's not, when there's not a vacuum. So
so that gets full. That's where all the milk gets stored.
The milk gets stored in there, but when this floats up to a certain point, it's going to make a noise. So
I see.
That turns on the pump, which pumps the milk over into a bulk tank on the other side.
So this is the magic room.
I know that people think that the cheese making is the magic part, but honestly, it's time and temperature and patience, where the goats are kind of the variable factor because, different temperatures of days, different things they're grazing, whatever they've gotten into.
That's a good point.
And people, no, it's the management of those animals that makes the rest of this possible.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so the bulk tank is here, and when we're milking, there's a pipe that goes from here down through this stopper into the tank. Now, it's been because whatever we have milked the evening before and then this morning, we turn into cheese that day. So we pasteurize at 146 degrees for half an hour. That's rules and regulations. And then once that's finished, we chill the milk back down to the cheese making temperature for the cheese of that day.
So you have specific cheeses on specific days, kind of?
It's here and there, now and then, because, and it used to drive people a little bit nuts. They said, well, what cheese are we making today while we were milking? I don't know, it hasn't come to me yet. Well, by the time we had the pasteurizer run, then that's 10, 11 o'clock. Chefs from the restaurants would call and say what they wanted.
I see.
It's like, okay, now I know what. And because we make the cheese in stainless steel pots, I have a 5-gallon, several 4 gallons, and some 3-gallon pots. And that way, depending on what the orders are, and especially early days, not so much now, but early days, when they called to tell me what they wanted at the different restaurants, I could make a 5-gallon of the creamy goat cheese, a 4-gallon of feta cheese, and then decide did they want more feta or more chev. And so I made to the orders that I was given.
Nice. That has to be really like an easier to manage product versus having it and waiting for somebody to tell you that they need it versus making it on demand.
Well,
almost.
I mean, this way, it was a nice partnership. I started doing farmers markets, but because I had been doing school groups and different things, people knew who I was.
I see.
Once I started doing the farmers markets, the chefs would come to the farmers markets, taste the cheese, and say, yes, I'd like this. And then we built relationships from there.
I see.
And they're a really lovely group of talented chefs in Atlanta that have been very supportive.
How many restaurants are you selling to, or how many chefs are you selling to at the moment? Kind of varies?
It varies.
Really?
It
Why?
varies.
Why
It's
so? Okay.
Depending on what, because if they're doing seasonal menus, sometimes they're making stuff with the cheese, sometimes they're doing something else. You've got Sweetgrass Dairy, which does a fantastic job of cow cheeses, and there's one or two other dairies that are local. And so, different ones do different things. I am just fresh cheese. Other people that, they've got an aging process and they've got the refrigeration for the aging.
Yeah.
And so for us, this is it.
Yeah.
One small, it's not a small refrigerator, but it's not a big one either. What we make keeps on going.
Yeah.
From Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, those cheeses go to the restaurants Tuesday afternoon and then Wednesday.
Yeah.
And then what I make on Thursday and Friday goes to the farmer's market on Saturday. And so
it's fresh.
Yeah.
Fresh. Is that just your preference that you don't do aged cheeses? Because it seems as though with your demand, you could add on and do a little extra. Is that just not what you
If you
prefer?
add an aged cheese, there's all the extra refrigeration, there's all the extra building, and there's, that refrigeration cost.
You just don't see the benefit in that at the moment.
No.
That's awesome.
I
love it though.
It moves, it sells, it's taken care of.
Right.
And that extra expense, and then the refrigeration breaks down, you have to have somebody to come and fix it. It's enough. This is it.
That's
I
awesome.
worked really hard to get what's here.
So you said the woods are very important. Why are the woods so very important?
Well, in the fall when the leaves fall, it's leaf jerky.
It is, yeah.
They eat those leaves. The little tendrils of privet and poison ivy, the acorns that fall in the fall, with all the acorns, the butterfat in the milk goes to 5%. It's like heavy cream.
Wow. That's awesome. The chefs that you sell to, do they know that there's going to be a difference? And how do you manage that if somebody's maybe looking for something a little bit more consistent?
They're lovely and kind, and I try and keep the product consistent. The creamy goat cheese, it'll just be that little more creaminess in the cheese, and you get more yield from the creamy cheese and the feta cheese in the fall. And then I occasionally make cheddars in the fall as well. But I don't do that in the middle of the summer because there's not as many milk solids. So you wind up not making as much.
So it's more of an art on your part on what you're making during each time of year.
Yes, and when we first started out in the cheese room, I made some brie. We had some cultures jumping from one cheese to the other.
Oh no.
But yes, we had the bacteria from the brie that when the cheese sat in not quite in a grocery store, they've got some cases that aren't as refrigerated, that they've got the cheese, open. And those would grow some of that penicillin bacteria. And people thinking, oh, it's creamy goat cheese, but oh, it's got mold. Well, it had the brie bacteria on the creamy goat cheese.
Oh no.
So I stopped doing that.
Oops. With having 40 acres, and it looks like probably half of it is in woods.
That's correct.
How do you, and I've learned now after doing a couple goat farms that goats are browsers, not grazers. But how do you manage like a pasture rotation? Do you?
I look at the pasture. Here, come over this way a little
it's
bit.
wet.
It's pretty wet. I just look at it.
And you decide where they should go depending on
what
each
the pasture looks
like.
Yeah.
So how many different pastures do you have then?
Now you're asking the hard questions. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
And do they stay in one for any particular time period, or how does your rotation work exactly? Especially since you have to pull them up.
It's just a here and there, now and then. And if I go with them to certain spots, they'll graze better. And you just have to kind of look at what's happening. And today, there's no way they can get up on the hill.
No.
Because
it's a little fast moving today.
Well, there's a bridge here. There's a cement bridge.
Oh.
But the cement bridge is covered over because they saw fit to bulldoze 50 acres and put solid surface on all of it, and all of that drains through here, and there's nothing I can do about it.
So you get sediment drainage, not just water drainage.
I get all of it. Washed away.
There's nothing you can do for that, but like, how does that work? Like, anything that they put comes down here and you just have to manage with it? How?
That's what they told me.
Wow.
I have tried for years. I have tried since, oh my goodness, 2017 when they started and were flooding me out. I've tried since then. Oh, no, it's not us, it's Forest Park. Nope, not Forest Park, it's so-and-so. And they just, I'm a nuisance to them. They've done what they were going to do. And so Kroger and all the big places that they've got over there, all the warehouses that they put up, I just have to deal with it.
Wow.
That's what I've been told.
Do your goats drink this water?
No. They can tell if it's clean or not. We have a water trough for this pasture up by the house.
So they have a separate water source, and they choose not to drink this water?
They choose not to drink it.
Does that ever make you want to just pick up and leave because you're harboring the consequences of someone else's actions?
That's the really difficult part, because I've cleared away all the debris. Every piece of property that I've purchased had a bunch of old garbage on it, whether it was metal garbage or just debris. And so you've cleaned and tidied this. Every fence that you see, this one's down at the moment, but every fence that you see was my fencing. I did hire the privacy fence behind us.
From those neighbors.
But other than that, all the fencing has been me. The woman with 15 horses for 10 years, she had 12 acres, and there wasn't a cross fence.
They just had the whole thing.
Yeah, and it was down to the nubs at that point.
Yeah.
But it's all come back really well. And so all the way over that way, there's 22 acres over there.
Wow.
The harder part too is that as they have developed all the acreage around me, I have a herd of 10 deer now that are also grazing all of this land.
Well, that's nice. I mean,
nice enough, but
some benefit.
The pressure on the land is 10 more animals to feed. But even with not being able to go to the other side, you see how it's all clear.
It is clear, yeah. The brush is down, and that's what the goats do. Was it like it's kind of bushy over there? I
don't own that over there.
Okay, there's a fence right there, I see. So is that what it looked like before you put your goats out here? It was just bushy and you couldn't walk through it?
You could walk to the other side of the creek and not get any further because of all the tangled brush.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you just let your goats out as they wanted and...
Yeah, and then somebody said, well, what about if you needed them? And just call them.
Yeah.
I call them and they come. But if I call those goats, then they will come from that pasture through here and down there, and you'll be able to see the whole herd on the move.
Sure, I love that. Let's see it.
All right. You may want to set yourself up like in front of the barn so that you can get this as
Sure.
I
And they're
see.
going down to the woods?
Yeah, we'll head down that way.
Okay.
You be nice to each other. Come on. Come on, let's go. Easy. Easy.
Hey, goat. I think you guys are going the wrong way.
Come on, everybody, let's go. Just a minute. Come on. I know. Come on, Hershey. There's good girls. Yes, there's good girls. You're doing fine today. You see that goat way in the back?
All the way over there. What's she
gonna
doing?
Have babies very soon. So
She's like, I don't want my exercise. I mean, you can really very clearly see your relationship with them. For something to do for your children, it turned into a business, and now you have some really awesome cheese in a quite a lucrative market. How do you get there? Was it just like one piece at a time? Was it really ever a? You said it wasn't really your goal.
No, it was
How
one
did you do
piece
it?
at a time because the goats that I originally purchased did a nice job of milking, but they were not they weren't, I'll say, award winners as far as structure. They did a nice job of milking, but I've selected more and more for long level lactations so that they can, and for animals that last that 10, 11, 12 years doing what they're doing. So having a good set of feet and legs and having a set of animals that could milk the amount that you needed to pay for what you were doing at the parlor.
Yeah.
And so I didn't have that when I bought the first two.
Right.
And there's folks that have come and, oh, we want to buy 30 animals from you. It's like, that would be the whole kid crop. And 3 years later, you hear that it was just too difficult and they've sold everything. Well, if you sold them your best, your onlys for that year, they're dispersed to the wind. What did they do with them? And there was one fella who, I need fall milker, so I leased him fall milking animals that would follow him through. But he bred them all. He couldn't keep his buck locked up. So if you don't keep your males locked up,
you're
then
gonna
they're
dry
all
out.
going to be pregnant in the fall, and you're not going to have the milk because they're growing babies instead of doing the milk.
Right.
So, you know, it's making choices, keeping good fences up, and the fencing, I could plant 1 or 2 fence posts and go in and put the children down for lunch and a nap and a story, and then come back out and keep on going.
Right.
So one piece at a time, and I didn't know that it would really work out. And we're not making megabucks. We're making sure that everything is paid for, that they're, taking themselves, and it's all pieced together.
How do you make sure that it's financially? Do you have to set certain prices for your chefs?
Well, part of it's animal sales. Part of it's school field trips.
Okay.
And that school field trips, those kids, they need something like this. They need to be able to go through the woods and see.
Yeah.
The one young man said, I'm scared of the woods. I said, I'll hold your hand. That kind of thing. They need the exposure. And the teacher who said, we don't want to see any snakes. Please.
I'll tell him to go home.
I turned around and said, make sure that all the snakes are taken away. That was enough for her, and thank goodness no kids noticed a snake along the way, because there was another field trip that we were walking along, and the little boy said, oh, look at that cool snake. It was just there, but if you're not used to looking,
you're not going to see it.
You're not going to see it. What we offer is opportunities and understanding. And I just keep on trying.
Why do you do that then? If you, obviously the cheese is a moneymaker for you, but you're saying to really make sure that financially you're successful, you have educational pieces out here. Why do you keep doing it then?
I love the animals, and if nobody had showed me these animals, I wouldn't have known.
Yeah.
So the more people that I can expose to how amazing these are. I mean, more people around the world utilize goat's milk and goat's meat than they do cow or anything else. But they're most efficient converters, but this country has so many price supports and incentives for different things. There's dairy buy-ins and dairy buyouts for these cow people. There's price supports and quotas.
Yeah.
It all makes you nuts.
Yeah.
I just try and keep doing what I'm doing, exposing people to what we've got here, and it all seems to work.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much, Mary, for having me out here and showing me the goats and giving me the loving from the goats, because this girl has not left my side since she got out of that gate. But thank you so much. This is so great, and I love what you're doing. And I think it's really cool what you've been able to turn into basically something to do with your kids into some really solid product. So that's
Thank you
great.
very much.
Thank you, Mary.